All right, guys, this is it. This is the season finale. Season 2, episode 6, man. This is it. It was, again, spoilers here, obviously. Big spoiler review. Seems like this was a series finale for the most part, I think, anyway. You guys tell me. I'm going to tell you right off the bat. There's going to be a lot of stuff that I definitely, we're going to have a full spoiler discussion on the conversation with myself, Winston A. Marshall, and Corey Jandro. So if you're brand new to this channel, you've never been here before, yes, I'm going to get a lot of spoiler stuff out here today in this episode. And well, I say today, in a few more hours from now, I'm going to have two guys who know about this stuff way more than I do. I watched the whole season, but these guys know a lot of stuff. They're going to be on later. But you're brand new to this channel, hit that button. Look at that great graphic. Come on, hit that button. We're almost to 200,000. Well, no, we're about 100,000 away, but we're aiming for 200. So if you're brand new to the channel, hit that button and help us get there. Okay, like I said, there's some stuff that you guys can fill me in the comments, because I want to tell you there is a few things that I was like, I think I understand that, but I'm probably going to have to definitely rewatch this, and I'm going to have to rewatch this whole series. This series, to me, this is the best Marvel series so far, especially when you combine 1 and 2. I think season 2 might be the best season of Marvel television that they've done so far. I think WandaVision will still be maybe number 2, with Loki season 1 right there. But I don't know. With the events of season 2, it might put Loki season 1 into number 1, because it's like into number 2 rather, because it's like a big movie. So maybe I just changed my mind in the middle of saying that. I think I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna go back in time. Number 1. Loki season 2. Number 2, Loki season 1. Number 3, WandaVision. That's where I'm staying with this. Why? Because it's a very well-written show. And I'm a science fiction nerd, and they played with time in a very interesting way. Yes, there are some things that are confusing, but it's kind of supposed to be. You're supposed to figure it out. The showrunner said as much. So funny, when we did this video, we had asked this question based off of this comment that the showrunner said. He said it's supposed to be confusing, and so we said, is it too confusing? And I don't think it's too confusing. But when you write that in the headline, people are like, no, it's not too confusing. You're not paying attention to it. Never said it was. I said it's confusing enough, and that's exactly what the showrunner said. It's confusing enough, and there's definitely, like I said, there's gonna be a lot of questions here. But the events of the last episode, and it kept getting better and better and better, right? Because, well, episode 1 was fantastic. I didn't love 2. It seemed like I was in the minority. It seemed like a lot of you guys liked it. I disliked it. Episode 3 I liked a lot. And then episode 4, it seems like everybody was on the same page. It left you like, what the hell just happened to Victor Timely? What just happened? He just blew up and turned into spaghetti. And then 5 was even better, because it almost like showed Loki as like the new Tony Stark, as the guy. He's starting to build these powers, and he's really fallen into what he was supposed to do. And yet he had to keep jumping over these hurdles, and it didn't stop in this episode. It didn't stop. But by the end of it, you're like, oh, he's got his powers now, so he's gonna be able to figure this out. So that's when we jump into this, man. And right away, just from the way that this thing starts with the graphics and the eerie music, the music in this series is so good. The composer did a fantastic job. I believe it's the same composer from Obi-Wan. I like her music in both Loki season 1 and 2 a little better than Obi-Wan, but nonetheless, this starts out right away. We jump back into the spot where Loki has now time jumped back into, or time warped, or whatever the hell it's called. And he's like, okay, so I know what I got to do. And he keeps sending Victor into the thing, and he's trying. He's like, okay, well, I can do this over and over and over and over again. I got to get this guy in faster. So he keeps trying to get him in faster. He can't get him in faster. So he's like, all right, you know what? I'll jump back even a little bit further if that's the case, because he asks OB, he goes, well, what do we have to do? What could we have done better? He's like, we needed more time. So he's like, okay, we needed more time. I get it. So he jumps back again, and he keeps going back, and he keeps trying to figure out how to get him into that thing faster. And he goes back further and further and further, and he keeps going back further. And I love this moment where, because Victor just keeps getting eaten up by spaghetti, so he goes all the way back through, and he introduces everybody, and he knows enough about it. And I love the way that they played with time in this, and the fact that he's been going through it over and over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day for him, to where he keeps learning more and more and more, and they can't even believe how much that he he knows at this point. To them, this is just a normal day. To him, this is years and years and years and years and years of work. And I loved this, and I loved how they did it. And I didn't know where they were going to go with this, because he's like, "Well, how can I learn as much as you do? How long will it take?" And time is like, it would take centuries for you to know. Centuries later. And so, and I do love that we didn't go back all the way back where he's learning, because I was worried they were going to do that. Like, he's sitting in the class and he's trying to figure stuff out. It was not necessary, and it would have just destroyed the momentum of what they were doing. And they go back, it's centuries later, and now he's just super knowledgeable. And he's like, I got my plan. And as a viewer, I'm going, okay, is this plan going to work? Because he's super smart now, and he knows exactly what he's got to do, and he knows how to get timely into it enough to where he gets him in fast enough. He tells him everything he has to do. He briefs him there. He gives him all the moments, and then they have this great conversation between the two of them. And Jonathan Majors is just really good in this episode. Really fantastic in this episode, in both as Victor Timely, and then obviously a little later on when we get back to He Who Remains. But everybody, the ensemble cast all around Tom Hiddleston, lent to that. Like, you believe that they were just there and they were sort of trusting what he was doing. But Tom Hiddleston, I said this in my immediate reaction, I don't think he will, because it's a Marvel show, which is kind of a bummer, but I think he should be nominated for this show. I think Tom Hiddleston is so great in this entire series, and in this episode of what he's got to do and what he's got to carry. And it is very poetic to what happens to Loki in general, how the burden with glorious purpose, and the fact that the first episode was called, of the first season was called Glorious Purpose, and then this was called Glorious Purpose, and you just see what it all means. And he's already, even before what happens at the very end, he is burdened by it, because the goodness, there's always goodness in Loki. From Thor 1, there's always goodness in Loki. But it's really come out a lot in the last two, especially in this season, right? He's just a kind of a different character altogether. He's got a different purpose, for sure. And you see kind of what it is and what he was meant to do. And I mean, he had more of a purpose than Thor, in my opinion, after all this. Loki's one of the most, like, him and Tony Stark right now, after these events, you see what Loki has done. And I was just thinking in the last episode that Loki would be, the Tony Stark, to where, because he had this power and he could do certain things when it was time to battle in Secret Invasion, but that's not what he's meant for. And I was upset at one point. We'll get into it, but in a good way, and in the way that I think they were intending it to be. But so he's now, as he's with Timely, and he's like, okay, this plan's going to work. This plan is going to work. Timely goes out, and as we have, almost like watching like Edge of Tomorrow. And this is the type of stuff that I love when Marvel does it right. And this is like where there are certain movies and there are certain shows sometimes whether it's Marvel, we'll use Marvel as an example because we're talking about Marvel with this. But Marvel will sometimes be in the middle of a story, and then they throw in this ridiculous scene or a joke that it's just like, well, what did that have to do with anything? That doesn't even fit what's going on with the characters. This worked. He's talking about what he needs to do, and he's leading them through, and he has like a couple of like one-liners as he's talking about whatever he's and it's just certain things he just says to Victor, just like little sarcasm things, not sarcasm necessarily, but like little quips and things like, don't drop the thing, we'll roll off the hill. And it just goes with the scene, but it was just funny in the delivery alone. And that's the type of humor that I love in these things. But Timely is just moving now, and you're like, okay, well, he's going to make it, and he's going to do it. And even though he's going farther and farther and farther, I'm like, all right, is it going to rip? Is it going to rip him apart again? But at this point, I'm like, all right, well, he's got it. It's working. Loki's smiling, knows, okay, it's finally working. It's finally happened. He's got this great kind of trailer reaction face right here. And he's like, yeah, this is it. I've got it. Come back. And then when Victor was coming back, I was like, oh, this is when he's going to turn into spaghetti. But he doesn't. But the thing doesn't move. The thing doesn't budge. Nothing's happening. And it's like they think that they've turned it around and that they made it work. But he's like, well, what's going on? and nothing. And time goes, you no matter what we do, it's not gonna work. It's like, what did he say? It's like multiplying by zero. It's just not gonna work. Whatever had happened with He Who Remains, it just messed all the timelines up. There's nothing we can do. It's just too many. There's just too many universes building on top of it. It's over. We can't do anything. And it's that realization again by Loki to where and it's a great journey that it's very well written, this episode, because it takes us on a journey. You're like, well, what's pun intended, I guess, what's the end game? And then we jump into the scene, and the second that this happens, and you're like, oh, they're going back here. They're going back here, and we're going to actually see He Who Remains. And as he jumps back into this consciousness of him, and I did think that maybe he was going to take out Sylvie, and that was the kind of the overall moment of what was supposed to happen. But as I was saying that, I'm like, well, and then they even address it later, the conversation anyway. Yeah, you could have killed Sylvie at that moment, but I guess you could find a variant of her, or you could find a different way to bring her back. I mean, yes, it would have been powerful and it would have been sad, but I get they did what they did for a reason. But this whole thing of what is ultimately going on here, and it goes, and I was so glad that they did this, because this was my favorite part of Loki season 1. Was when they were dealing with He Who Remains and this entire battle here. So they revisited it, and it was just as powerful as in season 1. And they jumped back to that elevator scene, which I remembered right away when they did it. And nothing he can do. He can't stop Sylvie, so he keeps going. And then finally, he's like, "Well, aren't you going to do something? Why don't you fight back?" And I love the way that Jonathan Majors plays this. I love what He Who Remains is doing right here. And like, how many times have we had this conversation? Loki kind of pulls one on him. He's like, we've had these quite a few times. I can stop time. I can do these things. And they have this kind of back and forth for a little bit. And then you can tell that He Who Remains really digs Loki and likes him and says as much to him, right, too. But then he tells him, he's like, look, if you kill her, then it's over. And then that's it. And he tells him to do as much. And then Loki's like, well, I don't know if I want to do that, but I can knock down this thing. And he's like, well, if you knock down that thing and you break that up, well, then it's just going to be this big old war, and then we all die. So you can take the risk if you want. It's ultimately kind of like the same thing that happened beforehand. So he's got another dilemma yet again, burdened with purpose. And so there's just like, he's like, just take her out. If you take her out, it'll be fine. But he doesn't do that. And we jump back to this conversation with Mobius, to where we like right into the beginning of season 1, and they have a great moment. And I'm glad that they did this. It gives us another really nice moment between Loki and Mobius, and Owen Wilson and Tom Hiddleston's chemistry is just fantastic. And then Mobius has this great conversation and tells kind of about his history, his past, and gives him a good kind of moral story of what he needs to do ultimately, of what he's got to do. And Loki gets it, and he's starting to put it together. He goes to shake his hand. Mobius disappears, and the timelines are collapsing. And then he's got to go back to this moment, because this is where they got me. He stops time. He has the conversation with Sylvie, and he's like, okay, look, I got to figure this out. She's like, look, if you want my endorsement to go and kill me, I'm just telling you. And he's got both of these conversations with both Mobius and Sylvie, the two that they've been with the entire time, and I'm glad we got these moments with the both of them, because yes, I love that it was solely on Loki and it was his episode, but he needed these moments with both of these characters, because that's the journey that we've been on with him throughout it. And like him and Owen Wilson just have just electric schmo chemistry, if you will. And then the stuff with Sylvie and all the stuff that they've gone through. So that to me was a nice moment as well. And then this is when it just kind of all goes down, man. He jumps back into this moment. He comes through, and you're like, well, what the hell is he going to do? And he knows that face right there. This is the kind of stuff. This is the reason why I think Tom Hiddleston, he just puts it together. This is why he should be nominated. He puts it together. You see it in his eyes, and he knows what he needs to do. And he has this conversation, and to me, it's like this Tony Stark moment. And this is the part that I was said in the beginning. I'm like, I didn't tape my reaction on this one, but I was sitting on my couch watching it on the big screen, and I'm like, no, you can't kill Loki. No, you can't do it. You can't kill Loki. Don't do it to me. And he goes out there and you're like, well, what's going to happen? And the music, again, is so beautiful at this point. And he goes out there and he doesn't need the space suit. He just goes out. He starts walking. And I love what they do here with this music. And he starts to turn into the Loki that we know. And he's got the cape. He's got the crown. He's got everything. He is ready to ascend to the throne, right? And they're all watching like, what is this lunatic doing? And he's got the Loki crown on, and he starts wrecking shop really inside of the timeline. And when he does this, you're like, they're still trying to figure it out. They're inquisitive. They don't know what the hell he's doing. But as he kind of did what they were hoping they were going to accomplish the first time over, but he's kind of created like these dead timelines. And you're like, well, what's he going to do? And the power that he now has amassed, he grabs it and he's got even the green coming through and all this power, and he's putting it all together. He's creating this new power source inside, whatever it's called. And I'm sure I'll get more of the terminology from Coy and all of them, but he's essentially creating a new Lu. And when he does this, and when he ascends to this throne right here, when he sits down and he starts pulling on the timelines and holding it all together, and you get like this kind of tree of life thing, it's so beautiful when you're like, oh, burdened with glorious purpose, like everything. It's almost like, I don't know, maybe they did have this idea for him in the beginning. I doubt it. But when he first arrived, but when he said burdened with glorious purpose, it's like, it feels like this is what he was meant to do. Like, this is what he was meant to do. Like, he's that guy. He's like just holding, he is, if not for Loki, everybody would be dead. And it's like, it is. And I think it's interesting. This is what you guys can tell me in the comments. Is this like a way for them to get out of Kang, or is it still because there's something that's teased later that seems like the variants of Kang are still coming in full swing? And then how they're going to eventually do that. They're going to stick with Kang and just make it a different actor, or they stay with Jonathan Majors. I don't know yet. But after this happens, and I like how they gave you a couple cards in this episode, and this one here too, after, and they let you know, like, they understand what has happened. They know that Loki has kind of saved the day, and the TVA still is around. They're surviving. They're helping. And I think this is probably going to be a bigger thing that happens in Deadpool, where the TVA will be now involved a lot more as they're trying to fill out all these multiverses. And then Mobius obviously really bummed about. And this is the mention of what was the actual mention that they said? I texted. I was very proud of myself because I picked up on it right away, and I probably wouldn't have years ago, but because I hang out with Coy and Winston all the time. When they said 616 adjacent, and I said, what is that? Is that the quantum realm? So I wrote to Coy. I'm like, is that the quantum realm? And he's like, that's what it is. I was like, yeah, look at me. And they mentioned that they give that mention of Ant-Man and Quantumania about what all went down there. So that's why that's why I was talking about, like, the Kang variants are still mentioned and still very much a threat. So Mobius is definitely not, this point, this is where this is what Loki kind of taught him too. And now he wants to kind of be at peace and kind of, I love that line where he says, I want to see what we've been protecting. I want to see this stuff. And I love that they did that with him too. And it gave him that, like, he doesn't just need to be running this thing anymore. It also gives Owen Wilson an out if he doesn't want to be in the MCU too much anymore. But they show kind of who is going to be doing it. They have the moment with OB and the new book. I think this is right. Tell me, this is the way I looked at it. This is Victor Timely, and he doesn't get the book on this timeline, and that's why I think that, like, so He Who Remains isn't set up. I don't know. I know that's the way that I read it, but tell me if I'm wrong. I felt like he didn't get it, but then you jump here, and here she's here. She's like, okay, wait a minute. When this is set up, this also feels like there's another Kang moment happening, because you see that pyramid in the back, and it looks like that's still a continuation. Now, I don't know if that's going to be Loki season 3, probably not. I think it just means that it's going to carry on as the MCU with everything happening inside of the multiverse saga. So when Mobius sees himself and he gets to see that version of him that we saw, and it's, this is what he said, exactly what he wanted to do. And I thought it was a nice moment here that he has with Sylvie. They talk about, just what Loki has done. They talk about how I love that line by Mobius where he's just like, I just want to feel time pass. And he's exhausted. He's been doing this for his career, right? He wants a break. And a really sweet moment here that I liked a lot is where Sylvie just they look at each other, they have a great conversation. Mobius just wants to stay. And then she just gently puts her hand on his shoulder. And I thought I thought this shot was the last. I thought it was like, okay, I guess this is the end of the show. They're going to fade out. But no, they fade out as they should with Loki knowing exactly what he needs to do. He's not miserable. He knows it. He's accepted it. He is burdened with glorious purpose. And this is what he does now. In infinite times, holding it all together. That's what he was meant to do. It really was poetic. It really was. Like it's very well written. It's easily my favorite show, favorite season for sure. It was done masterfully. It really was. It was a really great show. I'm glad I hope more people watch it. I know that I think the ratings were like up and down. And I don't know if that's just because of the Marvel kind of people were up and down with Marvel right now, but this is a really, really good show, and it's a win for Marvel, and I think they needed a win. And it also does what I think that Marvel needed, was to set up what the hell's going on in this multiverse thing and how it really, because it was like just kind of all over the place. Like it wasn't, now it's like, yeah, we have this, Kang to me was a lot more threatening in this episode than he has been at all because of what is out there. But there's a lot more, and I'm sure. I'm gonna have a spoiler conversation with Winston and Coy later on today. You'll be able to watch it. If you're watching this on Patreon, you'll see it a little early. So I put this out to the patrons a little early. If you want to join Patreon and get special things like this a little earlier, just go to patreon.com/thebigthingshow. We put out a couple episodes up early for patrons up there. We have Q&As and a lot of other things. So thanks for joining us here today. I appreciate it. What did you think of the episode overall? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you like the season? Do you agree with me that the series is the best series so far? I'd love to get all your thoughts. Please go ahead and let your thoughts be known. Thanks for joining. I appreciate you. And we'll see you on the flip side. Hit that button again, man. Subscribe. Help us get to 200,000. We're making. We're trying. We're moving. We're grooving. All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. See you next time.